right, let's kick off this deep dive by immediately challenging something most of us grew up believing. You know, that number on the scale. Well, it turns out it doesn't really tell the full story.
Not at all.
In fact, research is, increasingly showing that where your body stores fat might far more important for your health than maybe how much you have overall.
Exactly.
So we're about to unpack why not all fat is created equal and what that actually means for you.
Right. Our mission today is really to go beyond just the surface level and explore how this distinction, in fat types and where they're distributed impacts health in some, well, surprisingly profound ways. We'll be diving into insights that push past the common knowledge, giving you a clearer, more nuanced picture of what's truly going on inside your body.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When we talk about fat, there seem to be two main players we need to distinguish between.
Mm-hmm.
First up, we have subcutaneous fat.
Right.
This is the fat that lies just beneath your skin. It's the kind you can actually pinch, often found on your hips, thighs, maybe your arms.
Yeah, the surface layer.
And here's the interesting part. While too much of it can contribute to general obesity, moderate amounts, especially maybe in the lower body, might actually be metabolically neutral or even like mildly beneficial.
That's generally the thinking, yes. It's kind of like your body's safe, visible storage, you could say.
Okay, safe and visible, but then there's the other kind.
Yes, in stark contrast, we have visceral fat. Now, this type is far more concerning.
Why is that?
Because it's stored deeper, way down in the abdomen, literally surrounding vital organs like your liver and your intestines.
Oh, okay, so hidden away.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here, and maybe a little scary, is that visceral fat isn't just sitting there passively, it's biologically active. Very active.
Active how?
In ways that are directly harmful.
Yeah.
It actually releases inflammatory molecules, specifically things like interleukin-6, that's IL-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, or TNF-alpha.
Inflammatory molecules, okay.
And here's the really key part. It releases them directly into the portal vein.
Portal vein, what does that mean practically?
That vein delivers blood straight from the intestines and spleen directly to your liver. So these inflammatory signals get a fast track, right, to command central for metabolism.
Wow. Okay, so they don't just generally circulate. It's a direct hit on the liver.
Precisely. These aren't just vaguely inflammatory. They're signaling molecules that can directly interfere with normal metabolic processes. Like they can really dial down your body's sensitivity to insulin, for example.
That direct pathway to the liver sounds incredibly potent. Does this mean its effects are, much faster? Or maybe the treatments focused just on liver health might miss the mark if the visceral fat isn't addressed?
That's a really crucial point. Precisely because of this direct delivery system, these inflammatory molecules immediately go to work. And they contribute to, well, a whole cascade of negative health consequences.
Such a...
We're talking about insulin resistance, which is a precursor to type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease itself, which is becoming epidemic, elevated triglycerides in your blood, and ultimately a significantly increased cardiovascular risk.
So its location is really everything.
Its direct line to the liver is exactly why its location makes it so impactful, so metabolically aggressive. It can potentially accelerate those conditions much faster than, say, subcutaneous fat might.
Okay, this is fascinating. What I found genuinely surprising in the research, and I think it challenges a lot of our visual assumptions about health, is that you can actually look slim, outwardly healthy, and still be at high risk metabolically. How does that work?
It absolutely does challenge those assumptions. It's a real paradigm shift. This brings us to a condition that researchers call metabolically obese normal weight, or MONW.
MONW, okay.
These are individuals who have a normal body mass index. Their BMI suggests they're a healthy weight according to standard charts, but they carry a disproportionately high amount of this hidden visceral fat.
So the scale says fine, the mirror looks okay, but internally?
Internally, their metabolic health can be just as compromised. Despite appearing healthy on the outside, they're just as vulnerable to insulin resistance, high triglycerides, and cardiovascular problems as someone who is visibly overweight. Their danger is hidden deep inside.
Wow. So appearances can definitely be deceiving. Given that, does this also challenge our whole understanding of what healthy weight truly means beyond just that BMI number?
It absolutely does. It forces us to look beyond BMI, and conversely, we see the opposite effect sometimes with fat stored in the glutafemoral region.
Glutafemoral, so hips and thighs.
Exactly. Hips, thighs, buttocks. Individuals who tend to store more fat here, even if it pushes their BMI into the overweight category, actually tend to face lower metabolic risks compared to someone with the same BMI but more abdominal fat.
Really? Why is that?
It seems this type of subcutaneous fat, particularly in the lower body, is less inflammatory. It might even act as a kind of safe storage depot for excess energy.
A safe depot. Like it keeps the fat away from the vital organs.
That's the theory. It effectively sequesters it, keeps it locked away safely under the skin in the lower body, rather than letting it accumulate around the organs where it can cause trouble. So yeah, this raises a really important question about how we perceive health and weight. It's truly not just about the total amount of fat, but the distribution is critical.
So does this mean those classic pear-shaped body types might actually have a kind of hidden metabolic advantage over apple shapes? I feel like that's going to flip a lot of people's perceptions.
Potentially, yes. I mean, the data leans that way. It certainly indicates that the location, location, location mantra applies very strongly to body fat as well.
Okay. So if the scale isn't the best guide and just looking in the mirror can be misleading, how do we actually get a handle on our own fat distribution? We know there are like high-tech tools out there.
Right. For the most precise, detailed data, you have imaging tools like DEXA scans, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, or MRI, magnetic resonance imaging.
Okay, DEXA and MRI.
These can give a really comprehensive picture, actually quantifying the amount of both subcutaneous and visceral fat. They're often used in, clinical studies and research settings to get extremely accurate measurements.
But probably not something the average person is getting regularly. So for us, for the listener who wants to get an idea of their own risk, maybe at home, what are the simpler, more accessible tools we can use?
Yeah, thankfully there's some very practical measures. The most accessible one for estimating central abdominal fat is simply your waist circumference.
Just a tape measure.
Just a tape measure. You measure around your natural waistline, usually just above the hip bones. For men, risk generally starts to increase above 94 centimeters, which is about 37 inches.
Okay, 94 centimeters for men.
And for women, the threshold is lower. Risk increases above 80 centimeters, or about 31.5 inches.
80 centimeters for women. Good benchmarks.
Another useful, simple measure is the waist-to-hip ratio. You measure your waist, then measure your hips at their widest point, and divide the waist measurement by the hip measurement.
Waist divided by hips. What does that tell us?
A higher ratio, meaning your waist is closer in size to your hips, generally indicates a greater amount of abdominal fat, and therefore likely more visceral fat. It gives you a sense of that apple versus pear shape distribution.
Right. And I guess it's crucial to remember that these indicators, maybe especially when you combine them with other standard health markers, like, say, your fasting glucose or triglyceride levels from a blood test.
Exactly.
They offer really meaningful insights into your actual metabolic risk, kind of regardless of what that number on the bathroom scale says. It's about building a fuller picture.
Precisely. These simple measurements can be powerful indicators of that hidden risk.
Now let's shift gears a bit, because after hearing about the dangers of visceral fat, people might feel a bit discouraged. But here's the really empowering news, right? Visceral fat is modifiable.
Absolutely. This is the crucial message. This isn't something you're just stuck with based on genetics or bad luck. It's very much within your power to change.
How responsive is it really?
It's actually highly responsive to lifestyle changes. And what's particularly encouraging is that you can significantly reduce visceral fat even without dramatic overall weight loss on the scale. Losing just 5–10% of your body weight can disproportionately reduce visceral fat.
Okay, so even small changes can have a big impact there. What are the key strategies?
Well, regular aerobic exercise is a big one. Things like brisk walking, jogging, cycling, swimming activities that get your heart rate up, they're incredibly effective at burning visceral fat.
How much are we talking?
Even aiming for something like 30 minutes most days of the week can make a huge difference. Consistency is key. Okay,
cardio makes sense. Now, what about strength training? Does that play a role too? Is there maybe a synergy when you combine it with cardio, or do they tackle visceral fat differently?
Oh, they absolutely complement each other. Strength training, lifting weights, using resistance bands, body weight exercises is also vital.
How does that help specifically with visceral fat?
It supports insulin sensitivity directly, making your body better at handling glucose. Plus, it helps build or maintain muscle mass, and more muscle means a higher resting metabolism and improves your overall muscle-to-fat ratio. Muscle tissue is metabolically active. It helps burn energy.
So a combo approach is probably best. Cardio and strength.
Definitely. Then, of course, dietary changes are crucial. Reducing refined carbohydrates, white bread, pasta, sugary drinks, and especially added sugars is key. These seem to specifically promote visceral fat accumulation.
Makes sense. Anything else on the diet front?
Yeah, it's also really wise to avoid trans fats, thankfully less common now, but still lurking in some processed foods, and generally minimize ultra-processed foods. These have been linked pretty strongly with increased central fat storage. Focus on whole foods, fiber, lean protein.
Right. The usual suspects for good health seem to apply here, too.
Yeah.
What about factors beyond diet and exercise?
Absolutely critical. We need to talk about sleep. Prioritizing sleep, aiming for a consistent 7 to 9 hours per night for most adults is incredibly important.
How does sleep affect fat storage?
Poor sleep or insufficient sleep messes with hormones like ghrelin and leptin, which regulate appetite, but it also impacts cortisol levels. And that brings us to managing stress.
Cortisol, the stress hormone.
Exactly. Chronic stress leads to chronically elevated cortisol. And one of cortisol's jobs, unfortunately, is to encourage fat storage, specifically around your organs in the abdominal area. So finding healthy ways to manage stress, meditation, yoga, time in nature, hobbies is not just good for your mind, it's good for reducing visceral fat.
That's such a powerful message, isn't it? That these seemingly simple, almost holistic changes, moving more, eating whole foods, sleeping well, managing stress, can yield such significant health benefits internally, targeting this dangerous fat, even if the scale doesn't budge dramatically.
It really is.
Is there one of these strategies you often find people underestimate the most in its impact on visceral fat?
That's a good question. I'd probably say sleep and stress management are hugely underestimated. People often focus intently on diet and exercise, which are, absolutely critical foundations. But consistently neglecting sleep quality or living under chronic, unmanaged stress can actually work against their best efforts because of the profound hormonal impact on where your body decides to store fat. You can undermine your progress.
Yeah, it's all connected. Okay, before we wrap up, let's take a quick look at where the science is headed with all of this. It feels like our understanding is evolving fast. What's on the horizon in fat research?
The field is incredibly dynamic, yeah. Some of the emerging findings are truly, mind-bending. For instance, there's recent research suggesting that fat tissue itself might carry a form of epigenetic memory.
Epigenetic memory. In fat cells, what does that mean?
It means, remarkably, that your fat tissue might remember past metabolic states, like periods of weight gain or loss, and how it responded. This memory could influence how your fat behaves in the future when you try to lose or gain weight again.
Wow. It's almost like your fat cells have their own little cellular history book.
Sort of, yeah. It adds another layer of complexity. Furthermore, researchers are digging into specific genes. There's one called CD36, for example.
CD36.
Yeah, scientists believe this gene influences how fat is actually taken up from our bloodstream and processed into our cells, particularly involving the lymphatic system.
The lymphatic system. I thought that was mostly about immunity.
It is, but it also plays a crucial, often overlooked role in transporting dietary fats absorbed from the gut. So understanding genes like CD36 and their connection to the lymphatics could open up completely new avenues for therapeutic interventions, maybe ways to guide fat towards safer storage.
Fascinating. So connecting this to the bigger picture.
If we connect this all together, it's becoming increasingly clear that fat is not just, a passive blob of energy reserve. It's an incredibly active, complex endocrine organ in its own right, constantly signaling and participating in our metabolic health. Understanding these intricate mechanisms could lead to much more precise strategies for managing not just weight, but fat distribution for better health.
Okay, so the core takeaway from this deep dive seems really clear.
Yeah.
Understanding your fat distribution, where the fat is, gives you a far more accurate picture of your health than just relying on BMI or the scale alone.
Absolutely.
And crucially, unlike maybe some genetic risk factors we can't change, that harmful visceral fat is something we can influence. It's modifiable through targeted, consistent lifestyle changes.
That's the empowering message. Our hope is that this new understanding empowers you, the listener. Knowing that you can actively work to shift your fat balance toward a healthier profile, less visceral, maybe more subcutaneous and safer areas, means you have a powerful tool to improve your long-term well-being. It really is about taking control in a way that goes beyond just chasing a number on the scale.
Exactly. And for you, our listener, think about what this all means for you. Whether your goal is preventing chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease, maybe improving your daily energy levels, or simply wanting to better understand the amazing machine that is your body. Knowing where you store fat is a truly vital piece of the health puzzle. It's a metric definitely worth paying closer attention to, perhaps even more than the number staring back at you from the scale.